Hello, welcome back to Mad Times with Madison. Thank you all for your support last week on my very first episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'm sorry they were so short. These are cases that I had already written up when I was doing it with Taryn, so I left a lot of room for talking, and I just threw my slipper on the floor if you were wondering what that was. And it has come to my attention that you can, in fact, hear my cat's jingly collar. So if you hear any mystery jingling, it is my cat. It's not your car or your home or anything like that. Don't forget, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts if you want a bonus episode every Friday, or you can always subscribe on Patreon. I would throw them up there also. And I think that's it. So we can get started. Today I'm doing the disappearance of Sneha Ann Phillip. So Sneha Ann Phillip was born in the Indian state of Kerala. She later moved with her parents to upstate New York, settling first in the Albany area and then in Hopewell Junction, which is a small place in Dutchess County. Following her graduation from Johns Hopkins University, she decided to pursue a career in medicine and enrolled in the Chicago School of Medicine in 1995. It was there that she met Ron Lieberman, a student a year behind her from Los Angeles, and they began dating. They appeared to be very different, which is probably what made it work so well. I do believe opposites attract. You truly need someone to, balance out your crazy. Otherwise, you will have, 47 cats and a bunch of credit card debt from shopping addictions. Or maybe that's just me. I don't know. So, she was, very pretty, very social. She grew up in Albany. She's, used to all of this stuff. He was from LA. He had shoulder-length hair, a goatee. She was an artist. He played guitar. They stood out from the rest of their peers more than they stood out from each other, honestly. In their medical school, they looked a little wacky. So Sneha was a year ahead of Ron in school. So when things started to get serious between them, she took a year off, traveled around Italy so that she could come back and they could graduate at the same time together, be on the same page and stuff. Which is just wild to me. What a commitment. That's insane. I can't imagine voluntarily being in school longer than I had to for a man. So props to her. So they graduated together in 1999. They both landed internships in New York, Ron at Jacobi and Sneha at the Cabrini Medical Center in Manhattan. They found a roomy one-bedroom apartment on East 19th Street and began to build a life together. They worked crazy hours because I feel like interns, especially medical interns, work the weirdest schedules, but they did always find time to spend time with each other. They would go to jazz clubs. They would find obscure hole-in-the-wall restaurants and go there. And Sneha really liked where they lived because it was close to her brother who lived on Greenwich Street and only an hour-long trip from her parents who lived in Dutchess County. In May of 2000, the couple got married in a Jewish Indian celebration before 250 guests at a Dutchess County inn. That's a huge wedding. At the end of the ceremony, Ron placed around Sneha's neck a gift from her mother, a teardrop-shaped gold minu, which is the traditional Indian wedding pendant. At the reception, he had the band play a jazz song that he had composed for the evening titled Wow, She's So Great. Sneha and her husband lived in Battery Park City, less than a half a mile from the Twin Towers, which they passed on a daily basis. On Monday, September 10th, 2001, Sneha had the day off. After her husband, Ron Lieberman, left for work about 11, she planned to spend the day tidying up because her cousin Anu was coming over for dinner on Wednesday and the apartment was a mess. At about 2 p.m., she sent her mother a message, and they ended up messaging back and forth for 2 full hours. I don't know if this was... It almost has to be computer messaging, she must have IM'd her or something. Sneha told her mom about her plans for the week. She had been wanting to check out Windows on the World, where an old friend was getting married in the spring. Finally, at about 4 p.m., Sneha signed off so she could run some errands. The 31-year-old internal medicine intern changed into a brown short-sleeve dress and sandals, her black hair pulled back in a ponytail. After dropping off some dry cleaning, Sneha headed to Century 21, the discount department store a few blocks from their apartment, just past the Twin Towers. Just after 6 p.m., she used Ron's American Express card to buy lingerie, a dress, pantyhose, and linens. She then headed next door to the shoe annex and bought 3 pairs of shoes. So Ron came home from work that night to an empty apartment. Although it was like almost midnight, he said he wasn't all that surprised. Apparently this was sort of like normal behavior for her, and it sounded like it caused a lot of fights between them. Sneha was supposed to call when she stayed out late, and she hadn't called him again, but he was like, whatever, she does this all the time. He went to bed. He had to leave for work by 6:30 a.m. When his alarm clock went off Tuesday morning, Sneha still wasn't home. Ron was irritated, though not extremely worried yet. She thought maybe she spent the night at Anu's place a few blocks away or ended up in the West Village with her brother John. She apparently did that sometimes. So he heads to the Bowling Green subway station, like making notes in his head that like they have to talk about this again because she like can't do this. He caught an Uptown 5 train in time for his 8 a.m. meeting at Jacoby in the Bronx. So he gets out of this 8 a.m. meeting and he sees his coworkers huddled around the TV. He has no idea what's going on, which I guess I didn't realize how big New York was. I don't know how you couldn't have known what was going on. I just assumed like everyone in the state heard it. So a plane had just struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center, about 2 blocks from their apartment where they live. He called home immediately. Sneha did not have a cell phone. He got the machine. He left a bunch of messages that morning, but Sneha never called back. He called her mother and brother. Neither of them had heard from her either. So now Ron is worried. The city's in chaos. He has not spoken to his wife since he kissed her goodbye the previous morning. So, like, where was she? Because she had no reason to be in the trade center. The possibility that she was trapped in the towers barely crossed his mind. He's like, well, she's not there, so where is she? At 3 p.m., Ron decided to stop wasting time waiting at the Jacoby for the Twin Tower casualties that never materialized and to hitch a ride downtown with an ambulance to look for Sneha. The ambulance ride against the stream of frantic people fleeing Lower Manhattan took 6 hours. When he finally reached Tribeca about 9 p.m., the NYPD had cordoned off the area, obviously. Still wearing his scrubs, he walked his way past the police line, then raced past burning cars and overturned fire trucks toward their Rector Place apartment. Without electricity, the front doors to the 23-story building wouldn't open. Eventually, he gave up. He walked to a friend's place in the West Village, where he spent a sleepless night on the couch before heading home early the next morning. This time, he got inside of his apartment. Gray soot from the fallen towers had poured through an open window. Paw print trails from their kittens crisscrossed the floors, but there was no sign of Sneha. No one had seen or heard from her since probably when she talked to her mom. More than 9,000 people were reported missing on September 11th, though the NYPD quickly whittled down the list. Officials discovered names that had been listed more than once. People called to say they had heard from missing loved ones. Investigators uncovered numerous cases of fraud. Like, this is just the absolute worst time to be like an actual missing person. Not actual, I mean, a lot of people were missing for reasons directly related to the terrorist attacks, but it's a terrible time to have a different crime going on. So 2 investigators went on into her disappearance. One was done by her husband and a PI, and another was done by the actual NYPD, and the findings were very different. So Ron's investigation. So Ron called American Express upon learning about the credit card purchases on the previous evening. He posted flyers in other Century 21 stores. Later that week, a clerk from the Lower Manhattan store who had been relocated to Brooklyn called to say she remembered Sneha, who would come in frequently. On the evening of September 10th, the clerk recalled that Sneha had been accompanied by another young woman, possibly Indian. But after reviewing the videotape footage for 3 weeks, they found the footage of her shopping and she wasn't with anyone else in like any of the footage. So that was weird. Ron filed 2 missing persons reports, but detectives, after ruling him out as a suspect, appeared inclined to lump Sneha in with the World Trade Center victims. So Ron hired a private investigator, former FBI Special Operations Agent Ken Gallant, who scoured Sneha's favorite hangouts, interviewed employees at bars and hotels near Century 21, and talked to Sneha's friends, family, and coworkers. Ken found 2 pieces of evidence suggesting that she may have returned to the apartment building early on the morning of September 11th. The first was a call from the home phone to Lieberman's cell. The second was some videotape from the security cameras in the lobby. Gallant also raised the possibility that Sneha might have been alive and living a new life somewhere. He oversaw a forensic examination of Sneha's computer, searching for evidence of a secret lover, an upcoming tryst, but he found nothing. And the fact that Sneha left behind Her glasses, her passport, her driver's license, her credit cards seemingly ruled out the theory that she was trying to intentionally disappear. So, although Ron was the only one home on the night of the 10th, someone made a call from their home to his cell phone at about 4 a.m. He doesn't remember making the call, but he figures he may have sleepily checked his messages because Ron found no footprints in the dust or any of the bags that she would have had if she came home. So he knows that Sneha never came back to their apartment after the terror attacks because he would have realized it. But it would appear she was on camera coming back to the apartment. A videotape from the lobby of the apartment showed a woman who resembled Sneha in the lobby just before the first plane struck the Trade Center. Because of the angle of the sun, the image was too bleached out for Ron to be sure, but on the tape was a woman whose silhouette looked very much like Sneha. Same haircut, the mannerisms, the way she was acting was the same. She was wearing a dress like the one she wore the afternoon before. She enters the building, she stands near the elevator, waits a minute or two, and then turns around and leaves. So Ron and the Phillips family begin to reevaluate whatever happened to Sneha on the 10th. So Ron and the Phillips began to switch gears and think maybe she was somehow wrapped up in the World Trade Center stuff. Ron said these kind of crimes don't happen in Lower Manhattan, that somebody goes missing from a homicide and they don't find the body. Killers are usually stupid. They leave clues. A body will come up. It would appear that Sneha just vanished with no trace. So he's saying, like, the odds of her being involved in a separate homicide are so low because we would have found evidence of something by now. So they're assuming that she probably heard the attack and rushed to help the victims because she was a doctor, remember, and ended up dying there. So her family is sort of accepting this reality. I don't want to say they're milking it, but they are fully immersing themselves as the family of a victim on the first anniversary of the attacks, because this is how long this goes on for. Sneha's parents went with their 2 sons and Ron to a memorial in Poughkeepsie where Sneha's name was read aloud as part of a tribute to local victims. 3 days later, the Phillips held a small ceremony at the Church of Resurrection near their home in Dutchess County, where they buried an urn filled with ashes from Ground Zero. A few months after that, a plaque went up in a grove at Dutchess Community College where Sneha's mother, Ansu, worked as a computer programmer that read, Dr. Sneha Ann Phillip, October 7th, 1969 to September 11th, 2001. By 2003, attending memorials had become a routine for the family, an opportunity to discuss their loss with others whose loved ones were heroes and martyrs. That October, intent on creating a memorial fund, he said, Ron filed a claim with the Victim Compensation Fund, which was like a thing going on. So another weird thing that added to the chaos of this situation was that Ron had asked Sneha's brother to do him a favor. When the media found out that Sneha hadn't been seen since September 10th, they sort of lost interest in her story because they were focusing on victims. Their words, not mine, quote, they were really focused on true victims of the attack. So they were having a hard time getting her picture out there now because there are so many other people that the media would rather focus on right now. They're trying to show everyone from the attacks. So John, her brother, took it one step further. Although he had been fighting with Sneha and had not spoken with her in 2 weeks, he concocted a scenario of her final moments live on WABC. Staring mournfully into the camera, he said, I was on the phone with her, and she told me she couldn't leave because people were hurt. She said, I have to help this person, and that's the last thing I heard from her. The lie worked. WABC ran a picture of her flyer, but no leads were uncovered, no witnesses found. As time passed, John began to worry that he had led investigators down the wrong path, preventing her from being found. He said, maybe if I didn't do it, maybe it would have gone another way. It became a hero story. And he thinks maybe that could have hindered finding what actually happened to her, because that phone call obviously did not actually happen. So while all that is going on, the NYPD had been conducting their own investigation that looked a lot different than Ron and the Phillips. Police reports and court records described a life that was reeling out of control in the months leading up to Sneha's disappearance. Citing tardiness and alcohol-related issues, Cabrini's director of residence had informed Sneha in the spring of 2001 that her contract would not be renewed. For interns, this is the equivalent of being fired. She was essentially fired from her job. She claimed that on an evening out with coworkers, a fellow intern grabbed her inappropriately. She filed a criminal complaint, but after conducting an investigation, the Manhattan DA's office dropped the charges against the alleged groper and instead charged Sneha with filing a false complaint. The prosecutors offered to drop the charge if Sneha recanted, but she refused. She was arrested and spent a night behind bars where she meditated with a cellmate. Sneha was also experiencing marital problems. In the months after she was fired from Cabrini, according to court papers, she often stayed out all night with individuals not known to her husband, who she may have met at various bars. She favored the loungy Midtown lesbian bar, Julie's, and the divey gay rock club, Meow Mix. According to the investigations, Sneha's indiscretions appear to have reached a low point in the month prior to her disappearance. A police report says that her brother John walked in on her and his girlfriend, who is now the mother of his son, having sex. Her alleged struggles with depression, alcohol, and her sexuality spilled over into her new job as well. Staten Island St. Vincent's Medical Center suspended her for failing to meet with her substance abuse counselor. Apparently, these problems reared up again on the day she disappeared. Sneha had a court date on the morning of September 10th, 2001, where she pled not guilty to the charge of filing a false complaint. Ron went with her before he left for work. According to a police report, the couple got into a big fight at the courthouse because Ron was upset that Sneha was abusing drugs and alcohol and was conducting bisexual acts. In this account, Sneha stormed out of court, leaving Ron behind. Unable to tie Sneha's death to the attacks, the medical examiner's office removed Sneha's name from the official list of 9/11 victims in January of 2004. In January 2004, the medical examiner's office announced that it was removing the last 3 names from the list of 9/11 victims, leaving the total at 2,749. So Sneha's name was one of those last 3 people that they were trying to figure out if they were victims of the attack or if they were just missing type of situation. The medical examiner spokesperson said, "This particular lady was known to be missing the day before. They had no evidence to show that she was alive on 9/11. And in November 2005, a Manhattan judge denied Ron's petition to set Sneha's date of death on September 11th, 2001. Judge Renee Roth ruled that Sneha officially died on September 10th, 2001, as set forth by state law. Judge Renee Roth ruled that Sneha officially died on September 10th, 2004, as set forth by state law, 3 years to the day after her unexplained absence. Because Ron could not produce a 9/11 death certificate, the compensation fund denied his claim. Based on Sneha's age and potential earnings, the claim would have been worth about $3 to $4 million, according to an attorney who represented numerous other families who had sought this compensation. Her family was obviously not having this, for multiple reasons. One, they believe she was a victim of the 9/11 attacks because nothing else made sense to them. And two, the NYPD is basically saying Sneha had a bunch of other shit going on. Like, they're basically calling her a mess. So first of all, they allege that she was fired for being a whistleblower for racial and sexual bias, not because of drugs or alcohol. A spokesperson for Cabrini says they have no knowledge of any sexual harassment allegations made by Dr. Phillip. Her husband said the reports of her being bisexual were ridiculous. She frequented lesbian bars so that she wouldn't be hit on by men, and she slept over at women's houses because it was convenient after drinking late at the bars listening to music. Her brother said the police report where he told a police officer that she had slept with his wife was a lie, and he never said that. The police officer had since retired, so they couldn't get answers on that. And Ron also said the police report of them fighting in the courthouse is a lie, and it never happened. And they also just couldn't understand the police's motivation to lie about this. So they're saying none of this happened, and it doesn't make any sense of why they would lie about it. So the family appealed that finding, obviously. I read, in their minds, they fully believed it, and really, what does it hurt to add her name to the list of the victims? What difference does it make to literally anyone else if they just do it? Her mom said, "I don't even have a grain of hope that she's alive or that anything else happened to her. It's more peaceful for me to think she died in the World Trade Center than I cannot bear to think of the fact that someone might have killed her." So, under New York law, establishing that a person died as a result of 9/11 requires clear and convincing evidence of the person's, quote, exposure to the attack. But application of this law has been uneven at best. A Manhattan judge rejected a petition filed on behalf of Fernando Molinar, even though Molinar called his mother on September 8th, 2001, told her he was starting a new job at a pizzeria near the World Trade Center, and was never heard from again. A Dutchess County judge, on the other hand, ruled that Juan Lafuente, who worked 8 blocks north of the towers, did in fact die in the attack. During Lafuente's death certificate proceedings, his wife, Colette, the mayor of Poughkeepsie, presented no direct proof of her husband's whereabouts on 9/11. Her circumstantial evidence included the testimony of a witness who frequented the same deli as Lafuente and claimed he overheard Lafuente tell a brown-haired man about an upcoming meeting at the Trade Center. Sneha's case contains a number of parallels to Lafuente's. Both stories have red flags. Sneha and Lafuente each lost a job, suffered from depression, and spent a night or two away from home each month, according to their spouses. Both victims also might have been tempted to rush into the burning building. Sneha was a doctor, and Lafuente was a volunteer fire marshal. One factor, however, distinguishes Colette Lafuente's successful expedited death certificate application and Ron's 4.5-year mission. Sneha's parents believe, quote, Ron's not the mayor. That's the difference. His wife was the mayor of Poughkeepsie, so of course she could make shit happen. The other difference, Sneha was a woman who allegedly engaged in an illicit lifestyle. The family's attorney, Mark Bogatin, calls her death certificate ruling moralistic and illogical. The decision implies that Sneha was, quote, partially at fault for her own death for participating in this high-risk and immoral behavior. He said it's like she walked into a courtroom in the 50s, which is what that sounds like, just because no one deserves anything that happens to them, and also, like, you can't just assume because of someone's lifestyle that something terrible happened to them, and it was their fault. So, the family was basically told that an appeal would be borderline pointless because of the factors that have to be met. Well, they went ahead and did it anyway. And on January 31st, 2008, a 5-judge panel in a 4-1 decision reversed Judge Roth's decision, finding the simplest explanation to be the most likely, that Sneha died trying to help people at the World Trade Center. Judge Dave Sachs, writing for the other 3 majority judges, stated, "This is a disturbing case." He observed that the central problem was the lack of direct evidence putting her at the site of the attack. However, he said, while the city of New York applied the clear and convincing standards set forth in statute, even assuming that the clear and convincing standards is applicable, the standard does not require an absolute certainty. It merely requires that the evidence make the conclusion highly probable, even without direct proof irrefutably establishing her route that morning took her past the World Trade Center at the time of the attack. The evidence shows it to be highly probable that she died that morning and at that site, whereas only the rankest speculation leads to any other conclusion. Here is no claim or evidence that the descendant voluntarily absconded. She had left behind in their apartment her glasses, her passport, her identification. There were not any unusual financial transactions prior to her disappearance or transactions at all on any of her accounts thereafter. In addition, the mother's testimony established that she and her daughter were very close and spoke by telephone at least once a day, but that she had not heard from her daughter since their final conversation via instant message on the afternoon of September 10th, 2001. It also established that the decedent used her credit card to purchase items at the nearby Century 21 store the evening of September 10th, but never used that card or any other thereafter. Since there is every reason to conclude that the decedent did not remain alive after September 11th, 2001, the only question is whether there is clear and convincing evidence showing that she met her death through the terrorist destruction of the World Trade Center rather than by some other means. While it is logically possible that the decedent died by some other means on that date, either by random violence or at the hands of someone she met the night before, there is no factual basis in the evidence for that conclusion. While it is logically possible that she died by some other means on that date, either by random violence or at the hands of someone she had met at the bars the night before, there is no factual basis in the evidence for that conclusion. While the demonstrated facts strongly support the idea that her death occurred in the context of the World Trade Center attacks, the testimony powerfully suggests that she was in the area at the time of the attacks, either returning home or having just left home again 5 minutes before the first attack at 8:48 a.m., whether on her way to shop at the mall to look at Windows of the World, which she said she was going to do, or run some other errand. Petitioner's testimony regarding his wife's personality tends to establish that, as a responsible physician in the area where the attacks occurred, she would have gone in and volunteered to provide medical assistance to victims. Importantly, thorough investigations by a police detective and a private investigator turned up absolutely no evidence of foul play, and both the detective and the investigator independently concluded that the decedent must have died in the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. As police detective Richard Stark reasoned, if she had died on that date by some other cause, she would have turned up by now. He explained that in his experience, while bodies may occasionally turn up years later, they almost always turn up. And this is 7 years later. They still have found no evidence of her body anywhere. So that was all what Judge David Sachs had written about the ruling to reverse it. The dissenting judge, Bernard Malone, said, since it is not known where the decedent spent the night on September 10th, it requires speculation to say, as the petitioner does, that her route home. Since it is not known where the decedent spent the night on September 10th, it requires speculation to say, as her family does, that she was near the World Trade Center when the attacks began, or that she was even in the vicinity of the World Trade Center. So he's basically saying, you don't even know where she was. So how do you know that she was on her way home from the direction you think she came home in and was near the towers at that time? He contrasted Sneha's case to LaFuente's by noting that he had a more predictable daily routine, a more stable life, and that there was an independent evidence claiming that the meeting at the World Trade Center he might have been on his way to. He said, the degree of speculation is greater here. Sneha, he can dissent all he wants, that's not what happened. Sneha was thus officially declared the 2,751st victim of the Twin Towers collapse. The decision leaves only one missing person whose possible death at the World Trade Center is unresolved, Fernando Molinar, a Mexican immigrant who had not been seen or heard from since September 8th, 2001, when he told his mother on the telephone that he was starting a new job near the World Trade Center. A similar petition to the court on his behalf was also rejected. In an interview in 2016, her mom said, Sneha's room has been kept the same way for the past 15 years. She said nothing has changed except we have added pictures of her and hung all of her diplomas on the wall. She always wanted to keep this house so that the family could come together every once in a while. Her mom and dad had no plans to visit the World Trade Center Memorial, though they would have liked to attend the ceremony. She said, unfortunately, when this happened, this had to be, 2016, she said it was just too long of a distance to walk because of the barriers and paths set up, so they, physically couldn't make it. She said, the last time when I went with my son Kevin, I barely made it and told myself I don't think I will be able to attend the 9/11 memorial service anymore. I personally prefer to go there on Sneha's birthday or any other regular day when it's quiet, sit near the bench where her name is engraved, and quietly remember her in a meditative way. The family also still keeps warm relations with Dr. Ron Lieberman, her husband. He remarried a decade later after much persuasion from her family. Her mom said, not only do we still keep in touch with Ron, but he makes it a point to visit us at least once every year. He visited us just a few months ago, and he has visited us twice with his new wife, a medical professional, and daughter, who is 3 years old now. He calls us quite often and is very much a part of our family and always will be, which I think is super nice. That is the disappearance of Sneha and Philip, who officially was declared the last victim of the Twin Towers attack. I don't know what I think happened. I do sort of lean towards the easiest answer is probably the right answer in this instance. I can't imagine the coincidence of them living 2 blocks away from the Twin Towers, but something else had happened to her. We'll never know, but they said, they had been waiting for pieces of her jewelry to pop up, in the ash when they were cleaning and stuff, because she had that pendant that they would immediately recognize, and nothing ever materialized from her. So tell me what you think. I am on Facebook and Instagram as Mad Times with Madison, so you can head over there and comment on the show post and tell me what you think happened. Because I don't know. I could see it either way. What I can't see is them judging her lifestyle and saying that she probably got caught up in something unsavory because she was going to these gay bars and stuff. Come on, be real. And that's all I've got for ya. I did spend the week researching a case that I have been wanting to do forever, and it is so good. I cannot wait to do it. I might actually skip the one I had researched before just so I can do this one. So stay tuned. Subscribe if you want a bonus episode, or if you would like to support me. I think on Apple Podcasts it's $4.99 a month. You'll get a bonus episode every Friday, so it's 4 bonus episodes. A little over $1 an episode. But Apple does take 30% for a year, and after a year it takes 15%, which is still kind of a lot, but I had to price it where I would make a little money. Or if you go on Patreon, there is a $2.50 tier where you just get the bare bones, as I call it. So if you'd like to do that, that would be great. And if you did that, I'll see you Friday. And if you didn't do it, I will see you next Wednesday. No harm, no foul. Thank you. Bye.